It's a great honor to be here with Rabbi Professor Daniel Sperber, who is a role model and a hero to me, a teacher to so many of us, a world-renowned author and professor at Bar Ilan, receiver of the Israel Prize, and one of the great teachers of the history of Jewish customs, among many other topics. And one issue, Rabbi Sperber, that has recently emerged in a lot of arguing has been the issue of women's ordination, women being ordained as rabbis. And you've not only argued that this is okay, but you've also been behind a lot of the ordination. Can you share a little bit about why you think this is okay?
I think that the question ought to be why anybody should think it's not okay. I would put it that way. First of all, we have to understand that ordination or smicha is not the original smicha that took place in Talmudic times. And that ended around the year 350 or 360 of the Common Era. And nowadays, smicha is basically a sort of a degree that's granted by some sort of authority, whether it's a rabbinic authority, whether it's a group or an individual, on the basis of knowledge, on the basis of an examination of some sort. And the person that has that knowledge and is capable of satisfying the person that's questioning him is granted a certain degree of authority, as though he was getting some sort of academic degree. Now, women nowadays are in all sorts of high positions. The Supreme Court judges in Israel, women. We've had a woman prime minister, women ombudsman. The companies, huge multinational companies that are run by women. It's a very strange thing that a woman should not be able to serve as a rabbi. Or what does it mean now to be a rabbi? Basically, it means to be a spiritual leader and somebody who can give direction to people that have questions of Jewish law, halakha, and to be able to answer questions when they're asked and consulted. So what is required really? Required basically is just knowledge. Knowledge of the textbooks, knowledge of how to deal with questions. A good lawyer or good judge has to know a tremendous amount of secular law. A good rabbi has to know a certain degree of Jewish law, and a woman can do that as well as a man. In many cases, women are much more sensitive to certain types of issues, and certainly that's the case when dealing with other women. Therefore, in many ways, they're ideally suited to serve in some sort of spiritual leadership position. We know that from early sources, biblical sources, Deborah, Dvorah, the prophetess, was a judge. She led the people. We know that in the Tannaitic times, in the 1st and 2nd century, there were very prominent women. Brulia, wife of Rabbi Meir, and others, whose opinions are recorded in our classical texts, in the Mishnah and the Gemara. And the fact that there haven't been women in these positions for many generations, there have been, incidentally. I mean, the daughters of Rashi were very learned women, and their opinions are to be found in the sources. In the period of the Shulchan Aruch, in the 16th century, we have women of great learning who were consulted and whose opinions are actually recorded in the text. But normally speaking, when we think of medieval times, Byzantine and medieval times, women were not very educated. Most women wouldn't have access to the texts, and they weren't taught as boys were, young men were. They didn't go to yeshivot. They couldn't read Hebrew. Their prayers were usually in Yiddish, and so on and so forth. So for various sociological reasons, for the main part, they weren't capable because of the social situation of reaching the type of standard of knowledge that is required.
So how do you respond to those that say it's not enough to have a halakhic justification, that this is a meta-halakhic issue and this is a break of the Masorah, this is a break in the tradition to now give titles like wasn't done in the past, and this is hurting Torah Judaism? How do you respond to those who claim that?
I think that usually these types of arguments are put forward by males, by a male rabbinic establishment that feels itself somehow or other threatened because up till now it's had a monopoly. The tradition changes all the time, and things didn't exist 100 years ago that exist now. Look, how long is it that women have had voting rights? Rav Kook, Zichrono Livracha, was against women's having voting rights. But nowadays in Israel, people vote, and that's perfectly well accepted.
Thank God for Rav Uziel.
Yes, and Rav Uziel supported that, and he was a great authority. So this argument from tradition is a sort of very wobbly sort of argument. It can be taken different ways. But we know that times change. We know that the sociology changes all the time, and we have to face up to the challenges of change. And if we don't do so, then we become disconnected from reality.
So you've also argued that women today in Orthodox congregations can read from the Torah. They can have aliyot to be called up, and can also lay, and they can read from the Torah. Based on Kavod HaTzibur, Kavod HaBriot. Can you share a little bit of your reasoning here?
That is a sort of a complicated issue, because it goes back to understanding certain rabbinic texts. The way I understand those rabbinic texts is that the texts state very clearly that women may have aliyot LaTorah, and in those times, in Talmudic times, in Mishnaic times, an aliyah LaTorah meant that they could read from the Torah, because the person that got an aliyah actually read from the Torah, and that she could be counted as one of the 7 aliyot on Shabbat. So that's a clear statement. The continuation of that Talmudic statement is, but women should not do so because of the dignity of the congregation, of the community, Kavod HaTzibur. Now, when you have a passage in the Talmud which has 2 apparently contradictory statements, one that it's permitted, and the second that but they should not do so, you have to understand what's going on. Presumably there are 2 historical strata. An earlier one that says women may do so, a later one says, yeah, but it's not so suitable. But the text never says that it's not permissible. It says it's not suitable. It doesn't say aval asur l'nashim. It is forbidden. It says isha lo ta'aseh. She should not do so. And moreover, it doesn't say that she shouldn't do so without giving a reason. It gives a reason. The reason is because of the dignity of the community. Now, whatever that means, why there should be some affront to the dignity of the community when a woman is reading, is a separate issue, which we could also discuss if there were time for it. But clearly, the text is saying, and it's only because of this reason that women should not may not, but should not read the Torah. As soon as we can be convinced that there's no affront to the community, that there's no then there's no reason why we shouldn't go back to the original reading, the original ruling. And the truth is that nowadays, men are not particularly offended by the fact that women should get an aliyah. It's only done in those congregations where there's a mutual agreement, an assent on the part of the whole community that this should be permissible. And therefore, as I say, except for Kohen and Levi, which are special cases, all the other aliyot can be taken by women. If they can be taken by women, they can also read it, because they go together, the two things.
So my last question for you, as these times are changing and our understanding of men's roles and women's roles and challenging sort of the power institutions that are male-driven, male-run, where do you think we ultimately want to end up? Where do you think the halakha and those in halachic authority positions should be trying to steer things in this sense?
I think that's the most difficult question. I think that as we start re-examining our sources and finding within our sources, without compromising them in any way, legitimation for all sorts of new, innovative halakhic practices, we expand our horizons. And as we expand our horizons, the original delimitations are pushed further off. And that is a dangerous thing, because at this stage we don't know how far we can go. We don't know what new things will be seduced into suggesting. So we have to be very careful. From my point of view, I see the limitations are that we may not at any stage go contra to what our classical sources say. We reinterpret them. We interpret them in the light of contemporary situation, but we don't say that they're wrong, or we don't say that we can ignore them. We're still stuck with our text. And I think that's probably one of the differences between modern Orthodoxy and, let's say, the Reform movement. Mm-hmm. Reform movement says we choose what's suitable, what's not suitable. Mm-hmm. We're not choosing. We're using the text, and we're not going beyond the parameters of those texts. What is permissible, what is legitimate, we will do even if it wasn't done in the past, if we feel it's for the good of the community, if we feel that we're adding some sort of spiritual satisfaction, helping to make the community a more religious community.
Mm-hmm. Well, you've been a model of showing that integrity and courage and scholarship. I hope you'll also check out Rav Sperber's wonderful books on Beit Adam L'Chavero, human ethics, on liturgy, his authoritative article on women reading from the Torah, women's aliyot, scholarship coming out on women's leadership and on Jewish approaches to Hinduism. How do we understand the Hindu religion? And so much more. Please check him out on Amazon and online. Rav Sperber, we wish you and your family so much bracha and hatzlacha and parnasah and shalom and briut and all good things. Thank you. Thank you.